Hello, 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 and welcome to Kindred Skulls. My name is Gregg Blake. We've got a great show for you this evening. You may have noticed we've been experimenting with our format a little bit this week. Tonight is going to be a preview show. We're going to talk about the Eagles, what to expect there. We're going to do a little bit of chatter about the NFL at large, and then we'll end the show with some predictions about the game. I'm joined, as always, with my lovely, talented, brilliant, oh so brilliant co-host Nick Olson. How are you this evening?
You forgot very attractive, Greg. I'm doing great.
Of course. I assume that was a given for all
For
the
the
viewers who
podcast
are
listeners,
watching.
for the podcast listeners, it's just important you keep that in mind that we're three very attractive gentlemen.
It's important that you keep in mind with how beautiful we are that you could be watching the video on YouTube.
It truly is a feast for your eyes. And the voice you just heard is Matt Freese. He's my other co-host. How are you tonight, Matt?
I'm doing fantastic. I mean, I just got told I was very attractive, so
I know one thing's for sure: your beard is damn beautiful. Guys, it's so good to see you this evening. We're recording this right before Thursday Night Football, so we're all excited to watch the what we hope is a really good matchup between the Chiefs and the Chargers tonight. You guys, how do we? I haven't spoken with you face to face. I know you had tape talk this week, and you went through everything. But just generally, just real briefly, how are you guys feeling today about the game? You feeling as jazzed as you felt this week?
I kind of want to give you time to get whatever you're feeling off your chest, Greg. I mean, I'm sure you got a lot pent up from the game against the Packers.
You know what? I feel a little embarrassed for picking against the team. Okay, but I had good reason for it. What I said was I needed to see it, and boy, oh boy, did we see it. I don't want to spoil, but I'm certainly landing heavy on picking the Vikings going forward. I was very pleasantly surprised at how crisp everything looked. It was a really impressive game, and I think I do wonder. Depth-wise, I think, as long as we stay healthy, I think we've got a really, really great team here. And I'm in, man. I'm in.
If I can just take a victory lap for a second. I was the only member of this podcast who boldly proclaimed that the Vikings would win comfortably. I believe that was my term, comfortably. And if the Vikings ever had a comfortable victory against the Packers, that was it. So yeah, wire to wire, we were up 70-0 at half, 20-0 for a large chunk of the game. So it was very, very satisfying. And I guess I've never been wrong. Don't fact check me on that, but at least this time I was not wrong with that one. So yeah, I'm ready to get hurt again.
All right, Nick's never been wrong.
I mean, if you really think about it, like.
Don't look at my 2020 wide receiver rankings where Justin Jefferson was relative to KJ Hamler. If you can just ignore that.
Jalen Rager, Denzel Mims, probably.
Denzel Mims, ignore all of that.
No, I mean, Kevin O'Connell came out of the gates. He beat our, hated rivals at home. Game 1. I'm in, man. I'm in, baby. And speaking of being in, we've got another hated rival coming up this week in a different division. We are playing away against the Philadelphia Eagles. So we all, I think, still have a little hate in our hearts for the Eagles. And there's certainly no love, no brotherly love in our hearts for the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm not sure if all of our listeners know Matt is a native.
I live in Eagles territory, so I've always hated the Eagles. I grew up hating the Eagles when they went to 5 straight NFC Championship games. I actually think I rooted for the Patriots against the Eagles that won Super Bowl, and it worked out for me as a middle schooler, but it really was, probably not the best in hindsight, given the success the Patriots have had over the past 20 years.
Rooting for the Patriots to beat the Eagles is sort of like rooting for Darth Vader to beat, I don't know.
I mean, they kind of were because they just won the Super Bowls, but they also weren't the level of Darth Vader that they are now back in that time period.
Yeah, that's true. So this should be an interesting one. Let's just dive right in, guys. First of all, Nick, I want to hear some of your thoughts about. I don't think we've ever really spoken a lot about Jalen Hurts, you and I. So what do you think of Jalen Hurts?
He's a really interesting quarterback evaluation. I think of him as a game manager type quarterback, which is a really interesting way to describe a quarterback who is so talented athletically, and he's an accurate thrower of the football, but where he's limited, he's a little bit limited in his ability to challenge you downfield, particularly I think over the middle of the field, and he's a little bit limited. Um, he's kind of most comfortable. He kind of still strikes me as a college quarterback in a lot of ways, a talented college quarterback, and he's come a long way since college. But he likes to live out of the shotgun, and that's where he's comfortable. And he will bail on clean pockets, and he wants to run and use his legs. And so, getting him to be a pro-style quarterback, I think that if he's going to earn big money coming out of his cheap rookie contract, that's kind of what we have to see. And we haven't exactly seen it yet. So, in that sense, I think he's kind of a game manager type quarterback, but also in the sense that I don't think he makes a lot of mistakes. He doesn't put the ball in harm's way a lot, and even as a runner, he's not like fumbling a lot the way that like some running quarterbacks are. But he's also not necessarily generating explosives downfield. He had one big shot to AJ Brown last week against the Lions, deep fade along the sideline. But other than that, everything was dinking and dunking, and that's kind of the offense they've built out of him. So I think of him as an accurate quarterback, a very fast quarterback, a quarterback you have to account for how he changes the numbers in the run game. It's an extra gap you got to block. You got to be aware of the zone read, the back option every time he hands the ball off. That you've got two ball carriers in the backfield there, so he's a unique threat, but also he's got unique limitations too. So it'll be really interesting to see how the Vikings kind of game plan for him, because I think he comes with specific things you really have to account for, but he also comes with specific limitations that prevent him from being a Kyler Murray or a Lamar Jackson or one of those other sort of dual threat quarterbacks in the NFL right now. So interesting kind of study.
He's a very, very interesting quarterback. Definitely one of the more unique guys in the NFL right now. Matt, do you kind of echo some of those sentiments?
Yeah, I think some of the criticisms that are levied against Lamar Jackson are more true for Jalen Hurts than they are for Lamar, particularly as a passer. Although it is a little bit inverted, right? Because some of the things people talked about with Lamar is his inability to throw outside the numbers. Jalen Hurts actually has the majority of his passes go out wide. He doesn't tend to throw the ball over the middle of the field all that much. That did change against the Lions with AJ Brown on in-breaking routes like slants and that sort of thing. But those are in-breaking routes against, man coverage essentially, which is a little bit different than throwing against zone and throwing over the middle of the field like that. So in that sort of way, he is a little bit like Russ and Kyler in terms of their throwing profiles, in terms of they prefer to attack on the outside of the field. I am a little bit concerned with how that matches up against the Vikings, because part of the point of the Vikings defense with the cover 4 system, with a lot of that cover 4, is to force throws to the boundary. Those are traditionally the most difficult throws for quarterbacks to make. I do think Jalen Hurts is capable of making that throws, but he doesn't have an elite tier or like special arm. It's just he's capable of doing them. And I think the other thing with the Eagles is they have the receivers that are capable of making plays on those balls with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, who's not a big guy, but he's actually got really good ball skills, particularly for his size. So it'll be kind of interesting to see that juxtaposition in this game. The other thing is obviously he's a threat with his legs. Nick talked about how you want him to develop into more of a pro style passer, but at the same time, I think his ability to use those legs could be impactful in this game as well. We saw last week against the Packers where Aaron Rodgers, when he was able to get out of the pocket, he was looking downfield. And I think part of his issue was he either lacked the chemistry with the receivers, or the receivers were simply not getting open down the field as he was getting out of the pocket, right? So those scrambles turn into sacks. With Jalen Hurts, when he's scrambling like that, he's not looking to throw the ball down the field. And Rodgers has daggered us so many times with deep throws down the field, right? But in this game, it was turning into sacks. Jalen Hurts, he's not looking to throw the ball. He's looking to run, and he can pick up 5-10 yards at a chunk. And if you remember last year against the Ravens, Lamar Jackson ended up, kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts with his ability to scramble. Last week against the Lions, I believe he had 17 rushing attempts or something like that. Only 2 were on designed runs. So it was literally, he was dropping back his first or second read. He didn't like that option, so he ended up running out of the pocket. And the Eagles have the offensive line to make that a really viable option for him. So I think it will be an interesting test of the Vikings defense because they're going to be attacking some of the weaknesses, and we can get into the offense a little bit later, but that's how Jalen Hurts, I think, affects it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you guys both summed it up really well. I'll cap it by saying this. I doubted Jalen Hurts at Alabama. I doubted him as a draft prospect. I doubted he would ever see the field as a starter, and he keeps overcoming.
And I criticized his passing a little bit, and we both kind of criticized his passing a little bit. And I don't think he's a good NFL starter in terms of who he is as a passer. Obviously, his rushing ability makes up for that a little bit. However, he has progressed significantly since his time at Oklahoma, where he progressed significantly from Alabama. So he's somebody who's constantly worked and gotten better, and I think that does bode well for him moving forward.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Let's so obviously that's one of the strengths of the Philadelphia Eagles team. Let's talk a little bit more, just briefly about some of their other strengths. One of them being they have one of the more vaunted offensive lines in the NFL. Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about how they operate?
Yeah, I mean, across the board, they're great, right? You still have two pieces from the 2017 offensive line that won the Super Bowl that was an absolutely phenomenal offensive line, completely shut down our dominant defensive line, right, in that NFC Championship game in Lane Johnson and Jason Kelce. Jordan Mailata, they gave a big contract a little bit ahead of time, I think, last year, but he ended up playing really well out of that season, and he's an absolutely incredible athlete, so it kind of like his career trajectory kind of makes sense. And then at guard, I think they have Creed Humphrey, who was a phenomenal player in college. He played very well last year. And then
Landon Dickerson.
Landon Dickerson. Sorry, Creed Humphrey went to the Chiefs. I keep mixing them up, but he went to Bama. Was awesome at Bama. Broke his leg or something, and won when they won the national championship game. And then Isaac Suamalo, I think, is the other guard, and he's a very quality NFL starter. He's probably the weakest link on the line, but when he's a quality starter and is the weakest link on your line, that's a very good line. That also, their offensive line in general ties in with their run game, which we talked about Jalen Hurts' running ability. Obviously, having the option threat at quarterback, the design run threat at quarterback, adds even more difficulty. It adds another gap that you have to account for in run defense, essentially. And then on top of that, you've got the really, really good offensive line that'll make it difficult on our quality defensive line. We saw both Harrison Phillips and Dalvin Tomlinson play the run really, really well, but we're facing a better offensive line this week, right? So they might be more effective in blocking them, even if they're good players. With the way the Vikings want to play defense, obviously you have the two high safeties. You're probably going to be relying on them screaming down a little bit more in run defense. And that's kind of a concern to me because last week, a couple of times they were simply late or they simply weren't able to get there because of their coverage responsibilities, which is part of the design of the defense. But if a team can end up running on you all game, it doesn't matter how good you are in pass coverage. They're just going to keep running the ball. So that's a little bit of a concern that I have going into this game. I think we will be able to figure it out. It's not like, this style of defense hasn't seen a heavy running team before, and we have the talent on the defensive line to do it. We've got very good linebackers in run defense fitting in the box. So it'll be an interesting juxtaposition, and I think a great test for this defense in week 2.
Definitely agreed. Nick, so we've talked already about Jalen, the person delivering the ball. Can you talk to us a little bit about the group that he has catching the ball and running with the ball? Let's talk about the receivers, tight ends, halfbacks out of the backfield. That passing attack, kind of effective, right?
That's one way of putting it. Yeah, I mean, A.J. Brown, other than Justin Jefferson, had the most productive day of any wide receiver in the NFL. And is, I think, a consensus top 5 receiver in the NFL right now. Just phenomenal. As a player, similar in a lot of ways to Justin Jefferson in that he's kind of just elite in so many different aspects of the game. Elite at the catch point, elite in his route running, elite after the catch. He might be the best after the catch wide receiver in football. The way he gets open on those intermediate dig routes with the Titans and the way that the Eagles are starting to build that into their offense, and the way he can just take a quick in and then just boom, he's off to the races, and then the next thing you know, he's 30 yards downfield. That's just a phenomenal type of receiver, and it seems like Jalen Hurts wants to go to him. And there were a lot of situations against the Lions where Lions played a lot of like man coverage, 2-man or one man with a blitz or whatever. And Hurts was just feeding AJ Brown, and to the extent that like I'm not sure. I think Quez Watkins didn't get any targets, and I think Devontae Smith got one and he dropped it or something. So like it was the AJ Brown show, which is not to say though that like those Devontae Smith is very good, and Quez Watkins is a solid wide receiver 3 too, and that's not even to talk about Dallas Goedert, who's one of the most versatile, really talented tight ends in the league right now. So they got. And Nick Stoll had another big game for them too, as like their backup tight end. So they've got weapons up the wazoo, and Miles Sanders had a good game for them. They've got a stable back of running backs as well that complement Jalen Hurts in the run game. So they've got elite skill player talent outside the quarterback. I mean, Hurts has his own. Hurts complements him in his own way, but like. AJ Brown's one of the best wide receiver 1s. Devontae Smith, one of the best wide receiver 2s. Quez Watkins is great. Dallas Goedert, one of the best tight ends in the league. So altogether, that's just a tough. It's a tough number of guys to try and defend. And schematically, it's kind of you've seen a lot of talk this week about how the heck do you slow down Justin Jefferson? Well, all those same conversations about how the Eagles are supposed to game plan for Justin Jefferson go equally for how the heck the Vikings are supposed to stop AJ Brown. Do they try and get double teams on him? Do they always leave like a have safety above AJ Brown and say, if you're going to beat us with AJ Brown, or we're going to let you try and beat us with Quez Watkins and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, and that's something you can do. But do you want to trust the back end one-on-one in coverage without safety help a little bit? That's kind of the difficulty there. And then the thing that really worries me is this is a very talented run team, and the offensive line marries really well with what they do in the run game as well. Like Kelsey's such a phenomenal puller. We saw the Vikings get gashed by the pin pull sweeps last week. The Eagles run those same things too. We'll probably see a little bit less of the traps and like the wham blocks that the Eagles like to use against the Lions last week, just because that's not the Vikings' game to penetrate upfield. They're more of a contain and not make plays in the backfield. But the sweeps, the drive blocks, the duo, all that stuff, and just the zone running. The zone read and the option plays with the quarterback, that's going to be very difficult to play because it's hard to play. It's already hard enough to stop the run when you're playing, evenly outgapped, when you're playing outgapped in the run game or you're playing with a light box. But you can't play with a light box against, a dual threat quarterback because you're already down a gap. Now you're down an additional gap and you don't want to get gashed in the run game. So will be very interesting to see. I think the Eagles are just such a tough matchup against what the Vikings want to be schematically, where last week the Vikings were in too high. They had the same exact coverage shell pretty much every single play. With the safeties like 14 yards off the ball in like a cover 2 look or like a cover 4 look, and the cornerbacks like 8-10 yards off the ball like every single down, and then they would do the post snap rotation to so they did play some cover 3, they did play some cover 2 Tampa 2, and so they mixed it up a little bit. It wasn't all just quarters in cover 6 and cover 8, but that's hard. That style of defense is designed to prevent explosives and say, we challenge you to dink and dunk against us consistently. Well, if there's an offense that can consistently dink and dunk against you, it's one with a dual threat quarterback and these types of weapons in the open field, especially somebody like AJ Brown, who is not easy to take down. So, it's a big challenge, and it's a challenge that I think matches up specifically very well against what the Vikings want to be defensively.
It should be really interesting to see.
So interesting that Gregg dropped on.
So interesting that we had Gregg drop off the call here. We're gonna filibuster for a second, but
Hello.
He's back.
I'm back.
God, you were making sure the game was on yet.
It's gonna happen once per episode, apparently. What I was saying was, let's hope, in light of all the talent that the Eagles have, that AJ Brown doesn't pull some crazy move on one of our corners and some Eagles podcaster doesn't go viral putting up a little "we'll be right back" post next to it. Am I right, Nick? Let's hope.
Yes.
Let's hope.
Well, fortunately, I don't think the Vikings have the caliber of corner to get that much traction.
All right, good point. All right, cool. So that's the offensive side of the ball. Let's just touch very briefly on the defensive side of the ball for the Eagles. A lot of talent over there. They have one of my favorite draft prospects, blocking up the center.
Jordan Davis.
Matt, tell us a little bit about the Eagles defense, just generally what we could be looking out for.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Eagles defense kind of had a pretty big glow up over the offseason, right? With all their additions. Jordan Davis, obviously, everybody also loved the addition of Nakobe Dean in the 3rd round. Although he didn't play very much last week. I think he only was on the field for 2 snaps. They also traded for C.J. Gardner-Johnson right before the season. They signed James Bradbury to add depth to their corner room, and now their corner room, instead of being Darius Slay and nobody, actually has 2 very good starters, I think, in there. But I think the strength of this defense is the defensive line. They have a very, very deep rotation. I've always loved Josh Sweat as a prospect, and he's turned into a pretty good player. They gave him a pretty solid contract. Brandon Graham has been very good for a very long time on the edge. It does hurt that Derek Barnett, I believe, tore his ACL, I think. I'm not sure exactly, but I know he's on season-ending IR. He suffered a season-ending injury in the last game, so that does hurt their rotation a little bit, but, they've got 2 quality starters up front, and then that interior defensive line is really kind of the star of the show. They have Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, both very talented, maybe more pass rush oriented at this point, particularly for Fletcher Cox. But then they also have Milton Williams, who was one of my favorite draft prospects a couple years ago, just based on his athletic profile. And Jordan Davis, obviously, is a freak of freaks in terms of who he is on the defensive line. So he's going to be a really quality run stuffer for them. And Marlon Tui Lapu also played significant snaps. I'll be honest, I don't know too much about him. I talked about the corners who have grown significantly. I talked about C.J. Gardner-Johnson at the safety position. The one thing I will say is I think they are a little bit weak up the middle. I don't think Gardner-Johnson as a true safety is necessarily, all that exciting of a player. I think more so him as a slot player, right, who has that slot defender who's kind of more acting like a corner in that sense. And then Marcus Epps, former Minnesota Vikings draft pick, is their other choice there, is their other option at safety. I don't think he's particularly good. I also think they're very weak at linebacker, and I think the Vikings can exploit that in a couple different ways. One, with Justin Jefferson routes over the middle. I mean, we hit that well time and time again. Obviously, that was more against the Packers secondary, but I think you can manipulate the linebackers. That's something the McVay scheme has traditionally been very good at. Obviously, we all have the memory of the 2018 Vikings-Rams game where Cooper Kupp and Jared Goff just absolutely crushed us by getting wide receivers on linebackers. So I think that's something I would look for the Vikings to target. I also think it's something we can exploit in the run game. Obviously, DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams had a very good game as well. DeAndre Swift had a phenomenal game last week. They got ran all over in a very high scoring game. So I think their defense is exploitable despite the talent that they have because of the weakness at the linebacker and kind of in the middle of the field because while CJ Gardner-Johnson is a great slot player, I don't think he's necessarily a true deep safety that's really a quality deep half player.
And one thing you saw a lot last week is they struggled to tackle. There were a lot of tackles left on the field last week, and part of that is, the Lions put their players in good positions to miss tackles. They get explosives, they get guys in the open field, and they got some tough running backs to bring down. But part of it is also like Kaiser White is like he flies around the field. He had some really impressive plays, but he also had some really bad looking plays too. So he's one of their linebackers. It'll be an interesting defense to match up against because where they're strong, they're really stout. Especially, I think they have an argument for the best cornerbacks in the NFL starting. It's funny we go from the Packers, who probably have the other argument, straight to the Eagles. So big test against these wide receivers. There's the run defense is suspect. They've got a very deep pass rush group. I'm not sure if you even mentioned Hassan Reddick, who's also there. And
yes, I completely forgot about Hassan Reddick, honestly. But yeah, big free agent.
That's how deep they are. So there isn't like a Donnell Hunter on the other side, but just so many guys, and they're all going to be fresh all game. So And especially like Fletcher Cox, we know he can baptize Garrett Bradbury in the same way that Kenny Clark can. So that'll be a challenge. We'll see how the Vikings want to attack it. Obviously, they're going to be circled. How do we stop Justin Jefferson? That's kind of the name of the game, and we'll see if the game plan will be fine. Take Justin out of the field if you want to leave Adam Thielen one-on-one. You want to leave Dalvin Cook one-on-one. We'll take those matchups too. Or if it'll be, hey, you might think you can double team Justin Jefferson, but through a smart use of motion and where we line him up. They lined him up in the backfield. They lined him up as a running back, as like an H back. They lined him up in the slot a lot. So a lot of different ways you can say, oh, we're going to double Justin Jefferson. But unless you're playing like true man coverage across the board, it's hard to like shadow Justin Jefferson or double him up with guys. And if you're doing it like a zone type of match, then if you motion Justin Jefferson across the field, and everything changes immediately. So that can get very dangerous against an offense like the Vikings that love to use that pre-snap motion a lot. So schematically, I think it's a very interesting. It'll be an interesting test to see how this Vikings offense will adapt to a defense that has a different set of skills and wants to do something. Will probably want to do a little bit more, at least than the Packers did, to sort of zero in on Justin Jefferson and try and take that away. So interested to see what happens.
Yeah, should be a very interesting matchup. And it's gonna be fun to watch. So let's we'll save our predictions for the end here. Let's just switch gears just briefly. Let's talk a little bit about the NFL. Guys, I want to hear from you. Who are your top 3 teams in the NFL right now? Given the fact that we just shellacked the Packers, how do you feel about our position in the league? I'm not asking you for a full rankings, just your top 3 teams. I want to find out if the Vikings are there. Matt, why don't you start? Who are your
top 3 teams for me are Bills, Chiefs, and I think those are the obvious 1 and 2. Like, I don't think there's even a debate about the top 2 there. And then I'm going with the Baltimore Ravens, number 3.
Okay, Nick, how about you? Who are your top 3 teams in the NFL?
For me, it'd be the Bucks would be the third. Bills, Chiefs, Bucks.
Yeah, Bucks was my other kind of thought there.
Okay. I definitely would pick Bills and the Chiefs. And who did I like? What did I like number 3 this week? What is my gut telling me? I gotta tell you guys, I'm kind of surprising myself right now. I think I like what I saw from the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday. I think I'm putting us at number 3. I think we can beat the Bucks. I think we can beat the Baltimore Ravens. Based on what we saw on Sunday, I mean, if that is what we are, we're up there. So
man.
I'm picking the Vikes. I'm going the other way.
Man.
Last week I picked against us. This week I'm all the way in. I told you I'd be in, and I'm in. That's subject to change, always, of course.
All right.
Okay.
Your 2022 NFC champion Minnesota Vikings. You heard it here first.
Hey, listen. If the shoe fits. Okay, real quickly.
It is
do you guys
a week NFC, so.
Yeah. Do you guys think that Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen are going to get divorced?
I can't believe you even asked this question. I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I literally could not care less.
I told you guys the story before, but like my mother-in-law asked me about this, and I told her it was like the first time she had ever asked me a question about football, and she probably knew more than I do. I have no idea what the story is here, Greg. So please share your wealth of knowledge of celebrity gossip, because I think I know who Giselle is, but I couldn't tell you how to pronounce her last name. So is it not Brady? I guess it's something else. So.
The only thing I'll say is I think there's a legitimate chance. I still believe there's a legitimate chance Tom Brady retires due to all this stress. I'll say that much.
He's making it to the end of the season. He's playing until he's 45. Like, that was his number 1 goal.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Giselle's squeezing his balls very publicly. All right, so let's talk very quickly about our top 3 predictions for Vikings Eagles as the Chiefs take the field here on Thursday night. What are your top 3 predictions for the game? And your third prediction, let's make that your pick for the game. So 2 predictions for the game, and who do you think is going to win? Nick, why don't we start with you?
I think that you're going to see a lot more production from Adam Thielen and KJ Osborne this game than last week. That's not to say that Justin Jefferson's going to have a quiet game. I don't think that's going to happen anymore, but I do think, you saw, I mean, it's not like Justin Jefferson was the only guy catching balls in training camp, but that is kind of what happened week 1 against the Packers. So I feel like you're going to see some shots to Thielen and Osborne. They're going to get the ball a little bit more. I think on the other side of the ball, I think you are going to see Jalen Hurts have a big game running the ball. I worry about the Vikings' ability to, I don't think they want to be this zone match defense. They want to have this very strong identity as a quarters defense. So they don't want to like put a spy on him necessarily, or at least not in the sense that you think of a guy like man matched up against Jalen Hurts. So I think they're going to try and survive death by 1,000 cuts with Jalen Hurts, and I think that's going to result in a big game for Jalen Hurts on the ground. And that ties into my prediction for the game. I think this is going to be an offensive-driven game. I think both teams are going to put up a lot of points. I do think the Eagles, I trust the Eagles to be a little bit more consistent moving the ball, moving the chains. I think the Vikings have the potential to be more explosive, but I like the Eagles' ability to stay ahead of the chains and keep moving the ball and, not have to survive off, converting, third downs or whatever. So I think ultimately the Eagles walk away with a win here. That's not to say that I don't believe in Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings. I'm very optimistic about them. I just don't like this matchup for the Vikings. I think it's very difficult. So I would say Eagles 30, Vikings 24.
Don't apologize. You make your pick, baby. Matt, how about you? What are your top 3 predictions?
So 3 predictions. I think number 1 for me is that Dalvin Cook has a 30-plus yard run in this game. Or I'll amend that a little bit, where if he gets a 20-plus yard TD, I think that's the same as a 30-plus yard run to me. So, a very big run for Dalvin Cook. He breaks away on at least one play. I think he's set up to have a good game based on the tackling issues that the Eagles had last week. Now, when a team has such a bad tackling week as the Eagles did, it's probably going to be a point of emphasis for them on defense all week. So who knows? Maybe we'll see a better effort. But I think with the lack of skill that they have at linebacker, I think we're kind of set up for a really nice Dalvin Cook game. My second prediction is similar to Nick's, with the Eagles kind of being able to dink and dunk and drive down the field, that the Eagles have a 14-plus play scoring drive. 14 plays is a lot of plays to have on a single drive, but I think they'll be able to move the ball in consistent chunks like Nick said, and that's kind of what our defense is designed to allow. If you look at the Eagles-Broncos game last year, right, that we got a pretty good example of, playing against this defense. Obviously, the personnel is a little bit different, but the Eagles won 30-13. They were dominant on the ground the entire game. They had about 40 rushing attempts, over 200 yards, running it over 5 yards a clip. And like we saw against the Packers, even when the Packers were running the ball well on a couple drives, we didn't get out of that too high shell. And I don't think that's something that this defense wants to do ever if they can avoid it. So, obviously goal line situations and stuff are different, but, between the 20s, they're not going to get out of that too high shell a little bit. So I am concerned about how the Eagles run game might be able to grind us down in this game. I should mention, by the way, that Eagles-Broncos game, they didn't have Miles Sanders. It was Jordan Howard and Boston Scott doing the damage along with Jalen Hurts, right? So it was... and I think Boston Scott's a fine player, but they're at more full strength this week. Even with that being said, I'm going to go with the player I think is the better quarterback in this game, because I think high-scoring games ultimately come down to the quarterbacks, and I think Kirk Cousins is a better quarterback than Jalen Hurts. So I'm going to go with 31-24 Vikings. I think that's a very similar score prediction to Nick, but I also think it's going to be a high-scoring game. We're going to see a lot of points on Monday night.
Okay. Some bold predictions, boys. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to piggyback off of Matt. I definitely expect a really big game from Dalvin Cook. It wasn't a factor last Sunday, and I think he's going to make his...
He looked pretty good. I mean, after the fact you see him at 90 yards, he didn't seem to be a consistent factor, but yeah, he was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying he wasn't, he didn't have a ton of splash plays, a bunch of touchdowns. I think he's going to have one of those kind of games against the Eagles. I'm also going to predict not 1, but 2 touchdowns from Justin Jefferson this week. I just feel it. I feel like he's going to be on a roll. He's starting the season so hot.
We're going to get JJ on pace for 3,000 yards and 40 touchdowns or something. It's going to be awesome.
His confidence is through the roof. I love watching him right now. Definitely, I'm hoping for 2 touchdowns from JJ, and I'm picking the Vikings. I told you guys I'd be all in. We beat those Packers, and we beat them. So I'm picking the Vikings until further notice. Okay, guys, it's time. It's time for 15 seconds of fantasy. We know that our listeners do not want to hear us talk about our fantasy teams, but we, namely me, desperately want to talk about our fantasy teams. So every week we dedicate 15 seconds of the show to our fantasy teams. Each guy gets 5 seconds to talk about their team. Nick, let's start with you. Go.
You know, I invested everything in the 49ers. I lost Elijah Mitchell. I lost George Kittle. Still undefeated. Still going to win.
Okay, Matt, go.
Greg, you're going down this week.
Matt, I cannot wait to wipe that smug smile off of your face. All right, guys, this has been a great show, great fun. Let's go watch the game. Everybody knows where to find you guys on Twitter. If you want to find me, I'm at You've Been Greg. You can find us on Twitter at Kindred Skulls. You can search for us on YouTube by searching for Kindred Skulls. All of our video content goes up there. We're available on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like us to appear somewhere that we are not, please let us know. Any last words this evening, guys?
I actually do. One thing that gives me, I think, a matchup we don't normally talk about, but something that I feel like gives me a lot more confidence in the Vikings, even though I picked the Eagles, is I now have a lot of confidence in this Vikings coaching staff. I don't think the Eagles are one of the best coached teams in the NFL. I think Sirianni and Gannon both leave some juice on the table with the caliber of players that they have. I think they're both fine coaches, but I think now that I've seen one game based on just one, it's only one game, and I don't want to overreact, but it went about as well as it could for Kevin O'Connell. It gives you a lot of confidence in his offensive schemes, designs the way to get the balls in his playmakers' hands in the best way possible, and give them easy layups. And Donatel, not just, yes, the guys on the back seven can execute these coverage schemes, but also like the games up front, the pass rush, the way they were able to generate pressure, the creepers. I wasn't sure if Donatel would if he lost his fastball. He hasn't called plays in forever. He's kind of just been tagging along Fangio, but I think he's got his own. I think he proved that he's not just a player's coach, not just a DB's coach, but he's a true great defensive play caller. So that I think gives the Vikings a big edge too. So I did want to
show.
Hey man, it's all good. It's all good right now. We're doing great. One thing I want to see is Kevin O'Connell be a little bit better situationally as a head coach. I thought we punted on a 4th down that we very clearly should have gone for it last week. I also thought maybe just in terms of there were a couple game management decisions I wasn't 100% there on. Obviously going for it on the first 4th down was awesome, but he used his players at an elite level, and I think that matters more than any sort of game management decision. Sean McVay's terrible at game management, and he still won the Super Bowl last year. So with that being said, I think we're ready to wrap it up here. Skull Vikings.
Go Vikes. Love you, boys. Good night.
Goal, baby.
The first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind. And we'll score. Vikings along. We'll score.